In the past 10 years, I've helped thousands of people start or grow their podcast. And I've done this both in person, remotely, and every combination that you can think of. And one of my number one recommendations when I'm consulting with clients is to get them to start with remote recordings, because the barrier to entry that you have with an in-person podcast, I have just found that there's very few people that can sustain that from the start, especially if you don't have a team. If you don't have a camera operator, you don't have a producer or editor, it makes it harder to record podcasts in person. But thankfully, in today's day and age, recording podcasts remotely has made things very accessible for the average everyday person. And what I love about this is the amount of stories and the amount of perspectives that are now available that just weren't before. And so in this episode, what I want to do is cover all of the things you're going to need to think about when you are deciding to record a podcast online remotely. And my intention is to leave you with things that you can put into practice immediately after you turn this off. Before we get started, make sure to check out the links I put in the description. I'm going to put all the supporting materials, links, gear, all of that stuff in the description below. Now I'm going to start with one of the biggest questions I regularly get, which is gear. What mic do I use? What camera? What software? And one of the greatest gifts of recording a podcast remotely is how simplified your gear selection really becomes. It doesn't need to be super crazy. So let's start with the microphone. Now, the microphone that I recommend is, of course, the Shure SM7B. It's kind of, one of the top ones that you can get. The Rode Pod mic is another one that I recommend if this is a little bit too out of budget. That is going to be something that really looks professional, gives off the podcast vibe, and sounds really great as well. Now with gear, I always recommend using this framework of crawl, walk, run. So of course you want the best mic, the best camera, the best studio, the best everything. But I always recommend doing those production upgrades in phases, because those things do, improve the quality of your recording, but it can also become an excuse and a barrier to not recording. I've seen that happen with dozens of clients, millionaires who have a room in their house that they built just for recording, but they never step in it. So you want to start with the simplest setup possible. And the microphone I recommend starting with is going to be either the Rode Pod mic or, something that's under $50, which is in the description below. Now, let's talk about the difference between USB versus XLR microphones. So a USB microphone directly connects into your laptop, and I would say that's the simplest way to go, plug and play. The Shure MV7 or MV7 Plus is also a really great version. It looks similar to the Shure SM7B. You've definitely seen it on podcasts all over the internet, but I personally think that that's already so up there that if you're considering that, you may want to actually just wait and get the Shure SM7B. The Rode Pod mic is a favorite of mine because it's about $100 and it has an XLR option. The reason the XLR is important is because it allows for the highest recording quality possible and the highest manipulation of the sound. So for example, a USB microphone that you plug in, you might just have, turn the volume or gain up or down, and that only can go so high or control the sound so much, right? But when you are using an XLR output, if you ever decide to record in person, you have something that will work in that scenario. And you also have something that is now going to be able to connect to an audio interface. Now, the audio interface is a piece of gear that you need if you are going to be recording remotely, and it is going to be something that you need if your mic is an XLR microphone. Typically, the Shure and Rode mics, the nicer ones, right, are going to be XLR. And so that XLR cable you're going to connect into what I love to use, which is the Scarlett 4th gen audio interface. If you are recording remotely, you can get away with the single input one, but I recommend, just to be safe, sometimes to consider getting the 2 input one. That's the one that I have. And the reason I recommend this is because if you are ever deciding to record a podcast on the go and you want to bring your interface and your laptop with you, you are going to be able to record with a guest without having to go out and purchase a whole new audio interface. But if you don't think that you're going to be recording in person for the foreseeable foreseeable future at any point, even if it's just mixed in, then I recommend you go with the single input one because it is a little cheaper. Now let's talk about why you need the audio interface in the first place. If you don't have a USB microphone that just plugs directly into the laptop, the audio interface is kind of like the middleman that allows the actual mic to work when you are recording. To give you an example, I had another Shure audio interface that I use, and for years, even though I have the best mic, it was not producing the greatest sound at all. It was actually the audio interface that was messed up. It wasn't really allowing the best sound to transmit. And so when I switched over to the Scarlett 4th Gen, it was unbelievable. Now I'm getting the most out of the mic. So that is going to cover your sound. Now let's talk about the visual. So your camera. Now this is where most people get too hung up and try to make this too complicated. Let's come back to the crawl, walk, run framework. The crawl version of this is to use the built-in webcam that is in your laptop. The walk version of this is going to be maybe now using your phone, right? And trying to get a little bit of a higher quality image, or maybe you get another webcam that you add onto your laptop and that's giving you a crisper quality image. And then maybe the run phase of this would be, you have a DSLR camera that you got and you're connecting that into your laptop to make it a webcam or whatever, right? So those are the different stages that you might look at when you're recording a podcast remotely. My recommendation is to always start with the webcam that is built into your laptop, because in most cases that is an acceptable format, especially because you might have, let's say, a 4K DSLR camera, but your guest might show up with just a normal, laptop webcam. So it's very normal to use that, especially when you are getting started and there's no extra cost that you have to consider with this. Okay, now let's talk about headphones. Are they necessary? Are they not? When it comes to recording remotely, I find that they are necessary. If you are recording in person, in many cases, you might not need it. You might have somebody who's monitoring it for you, but in a remote recording setting, the reason it's important is because if there is any sound coming from your laptop or the guest's laptop, that sound can, be picked up in either one of your mics. And then it's going to have this echo that is going to be very hard to remove sometimes. So what you want to do is make sure that your guest and you both have headphones on. Now let's talk about software. So Zoom is of course what you're probably thinking when you think about recording a podcast or recording anything, because it's free. If you're shooting under 40 minutes, you can of course, have this exact setup, and most people are used to that interface. So that is certainly acceptable to get started. But one of the downsides that I've experienced with Zoom is that if you have any issues with your internet or your guest's internet, that is going to get baked into the recording. The other thing is that you don't have separate video tracks for each speaker. So you do have that after all these years for the audio, where you'll get two separate tracks if you turn that on inside of Zoom. And this is nice. It allows you to manipulate the sound a little bit more if there's any major errors. You have more control and flexibility versus everything being baked into one. So for example, if their volume is really low when they're talking and yours is really high, to be able to balance that out, you need individual tracks. If you don't, then everything is baked into one, and it's a real headache to have to do that. So I always recommend using Riverside. Riverside is a tool that I've experimented with for about 5 years. Now, I recommend Riverside over Zoom and over a bunch of the other tools that are out there because of the professional vibe that it not only gives off, but that it also allows you to feel. So as you are going through the recording, going through the actual post-production, you do get a sense of organization and this streamlined feel to it. And because if you are recording, over 40 minutes with something like Zoom, you're going to have to get the paid version anyways, or else it'll kick you off. I recommend investing that money in Riverside, because what this will do is get you the highest quality tracks for the video, for the audio. And if there is any internet issues throughout your recording, what happens with Riverside is that it records locally first, and then after you are done the episode, it gets uploaded to the cloud. So any issues that are present, you have the highest chance to be able to fix some of that or save some of that. And I can tell you, I've used all the softwares over the past 10 years that also promise this. And one of the most frustrating things that can happen with recording remotely is if there is an issue and that gets baked in and you don't realize it until after and it's not fixable anymore, right? So I have just found Riverside to be this headache-free place where I have rarely had any issues. And if you do happen to have an issue with one recording, there's like an ID for each recording, and you can just give that to support and they're able to investigate, revive, bring it back sometimes. And I found that that is very, very useful. Now, this professional vibe that I'm talking about is not just about how it looks, it is about how it performs. It captures the highest studio quality audio in 48 kilohertz. It also allows you to capture in up to 4K, which is something that other softwares you use, like Zoom, will limit it to 720p, 1080p, and the resolution just looks, a little grainy. And because of that cloud and local backup process that I talked about that's happening while you record, the cool part is that after you're done, there's no headache with, I need to upload my files or get it off my camera or transfer it over to my laptop, because I can't tell you the amount of times I've gotten that question of like, so where does my file go? What do I do with it, right? And the truth is that okay, everything is organized in one place, all those tracks, so you don't have to put it in a Google Drive or a Dropbox. And if you're working with an editor and you want to send them all of these assets to get started, it literally is one click to share all the project assets, and everything's already uploaded to the cloud, so nothing extra needs to be actually uploaded. Now let's talk about the guest experience, because this part is very important. If your guest is not present, they feel a little frazzled, they are not going to be able to bring their best selves to the recording. The same way, if you're fiddling with a bunch of equipment, you're trying to work your software, you're not going to be able to be present when you are recording. So think about the guest experience from being able to send an invite for the recording, having the link and everything in one place. You click it once and you're in the studio. Now, I don't recommend that you use your phone. I always suggest going with desktop for the most control and reliability. But for your guest, having that phone option is very useful. It's something I've seen tons of people take advantage of over the years, purely because your iPhone or whatever phone you're using has a high quality camera, way higher quality than what most laptops come built in with, right? And so there's a clear difference in resolution when you are using even the front facing camera on your mobile phone. And so if you have the Riverside app, you literally are able to join as a guest, and as long as you set it up horizontally instead of vertically, everything turns out fine in post-production. Now, the one thing I'd make sure your guest does is the way they set up their camera, their webcam, their iPhone, whatever, making sure that they're in the center of the frame and that their eye level, right, is around the same level as you. What this does is when you are using something like Riverside, thankfully, there is all sorts of extra features that help you with the editing and post-production. And so if you click, the AI magic clips, for example, it will automatically make clips from the recording and adjust the layout and, crop you and your guest in the perfect ratio and change that automatically based on when the speaker switches and things like that. And so as long as when you're filming it, you make sure that the proportions are pretty solid, that stuff, that one decision carries over in the rest of your post-production process, whether it's the full episode, long form clips, short form clips, everything happens smoothly because you've set the recording up right. The other cool thing is that you can add some branding and personality to the studio so that it feels a little more you, but even cooler is that you can live stream. So I've had several clients who like to live stream to different places like Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn. And what you can do is, if you wanted to do it both at once, you can actually set that up initially. And then when you hit record, you can also go live. Now, it is going to stream in 1080p, but it will be captured in 4K for when you actually edit and export and maybe, post it as an extra video. So the live part of this is really cool because there's these chat features, there's lower thirds features, there's all these things that streamers seem to appreciate because it's kind of like an all-in-one solution. This is why Riverside is a no-brainer, because it allows you to do so many things beyond just recording. And when it first came out and when I first started using it years ago, that was their main thing, was just recording. But what's awesome is they've expanded now to all sorts of things. There's basically a full editor that's available inside of Riverside, where you don't even need an additional editing software. If you are recording your podcast remotely, you probably will be able to get away with just using Riverside for everything. The other cool thing is you can have up to 8 guests, I believe. So I've had clients who use this for semi-group trainings and workshops and things that they run, where instead of having 8 people in a Zoom meeting, they'll have 8 people in Riverside. And what this does is those 8 individual tracks of video and audio for each speaker get captured. And if you wanted to turn that into an asset or make a clip out of it later, you have the ability to do so. The other thing that's pretty wild is the magic AI feature, right? This has definitely improved over the years to where you literally can click once and your full episode, audio and video, basically gets edited. And if you don't have any major flubs and you are recording your podcast pretty freely, those automatic AI features are going to be even more useful for you, right? To be able to kind of automatically add an intro, add an outro. It remembers these things. And I find that there's even more complex editing softwares that I've used that don't have that don't have these presets that it will remember or give you these options so quickly to be able to generate a full episode or 10 different clips. A lot of times you are sacrificing quality. Like when you get this stuff, you're like, cool clip, but I'm not going to publish this. That's not the case with the Riverside. The intelligence is getting better and better of detecting the good moments and being able to actually do things in one click where you don't have to actually go in there and do too much once you've set things up. So highly recommend for that purpose, along with the actual recording process. Now let's go ahead and play this clip of an episode that I recorded and edited with Riverside.
Their level 1 use cases almost always are have it read and write your emails, have it write your talking points. And that's like using AI like $10 an hour intern, which is almost like as silly as having a Ferrari and driving it to the grocery store. It's like, yeah, sure, you can do that, but it's like, that's not what a Ferrari was built for, right? Understanding how to use AI to help you make better decisions and how to frame the right questions to turn it into kind of your sparring partner, your thinking partner. Learning how to use AI like a $700 an hour consultant is the real unlock.
So there you have it. If you want to try Riverside, because they do have a free trial, so why not? Make sure to click my link in the description below. You can also enter my code Pod Mahal and you'll get 15% off any pro plan. Thanks so much for hanging out. Make sure to drop a comment if you enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions. I would love to hear from you, but appreciate your time and best of luck with your show. See you on the next one.